Hi everyone. Hello. My name is Tijl, and I'm first going to ask some questions. Who here is a little bit new with Flutter, or is starting up? Like, okay, we have quite a people that are starting to learn Flutter. Okay, that's nice. That's nice. Who here has some knowledge about React? Okay. Nice. We have some people that know React. Okay, that's good, because that's what my talk is about. All right. Let me introduce myself. I'm Tijl. I am the mobile lead here at Lemon, starting with Flutter and everything that mobile related, because we like some mobile things over here. Lemon is already introduced. So let me get right into it. All right. So first, a little bit of a timeline here, because obviously, like we said, we started from React. How did that happen? Like a few years back, I started working here, and I started here as a React developer. I was doing web development in React, but we also needed some mobile applications over here. And then, obviously, a quite natural approach would be to start using React Native, because the technologies are quite similar in the way that they work. So we could quite easily transition to it. So we started developing projects in React Native. For example, we had Playas1 or E6. Those are some older projects that we built, and we built them using React Native. Then some clients came, for example, Linker, and they needed also web technology together with their mobile applications. And at the time, React Native, there was like a web version, but it didn't really do anything. So what we did, we built the application completely in React, the web version, and we just packaged it in Capacitor and shipped that to the stores, so we could have a mobile application in the stores and also use web technology. Okay, so we went a few months further, and I already went to a Flutter talk, and I heard a lot about this Flutter thing. And I really wanted to do something with it, because I heard a lot about it. I was like, wow, this is cool technology. I want to do something with it. And then a small project came our way. It was for the Slim's Demands. I think most people know it over here. It's the board game. They needed like a small timer app to companion the board game. So it was a small project, and we were like, okay, we're gonna try this in Flutter. So I had about 3 weeks where I was like learning Flutter and also building this application. It was a fairly easy thing because there was no backend involved. It was just some basic timers and only a few screens. So it was quite doable, not a lot of complexity involved. But I liked what I saw there with Flutter. We had this more intuitive way of building UIs instead of like using that dated HTML technology. We were now able to use these classes that were available in the Flutter ecosystem. I was like, okay, this is nice. I like where this is going, and also the app that came out of it was quite a polished application. I was like, okay, I like this technology. Okay, but now we had this technology, we liked it, but we also had a whole bunch of other developers that were used to develop in React, and we needed to spin it up, because obviously I wasn't going to be able to build all this app alone. So we needed to shift some other developers. And we did it in a bigger project called Bvoy. But yeah, how we're gonna move everything over? We have a few things that we need to tackle first. The first thing is state management. Obviously, that's quite important for an application. And we had already had some equivalent for that in React. We could use the hooks, the use state. We could manage some state there. We also need to manage a global state that also had an equivalent in React. We could use the context provider. We also had a way to do network calls using the React query libraries or other similar libraries. Also responsive design, also quite important, but in web technology that's fairly easy to do. And we also need a way to deploy everything to test. All right, so we have these building blocks that we need to manage, that we need to finish. All right, how were we gonna tackle that? And then I stumbled upon this nice package that really solved my key to how we could transition from React to Flutter. And it's called Flutter Hooks. Who here knows about Flutter hooks? Okay, quite a lot of people know about it. It's very nice, okay, right? This was really the bread and butter of how we were able to transition easily from React to Flutter. Because I was used to writing everything in React, I was used to using the use state, use effect, all this functional programming stuff. And when I was doing Flutter at first, all these classes and stateful and stateless widgets, I was like, I'm not used to this OOP stuff. Like, if you are good with it, continue doing it. But it was not my thing. So then I stumbled upon Flutter hooks, and I was like, okay, we can use this. So we started using that in our projects, and I want to show you a little bit. So we have, for example, for Fiberclad, we have this application where we also needed to manage a lot of states, a lot of forms, and we were able to do all of that functionally using these Flutter hooks. But for here, we have an example. It's just a basic React component. It has a button on it, and we can click on it, and it will increment the timer. I think most people over here will know what this application is, because everybody has started a Flutter project. And inside of this application, we have state. Let's start with useState to start on 0. That has the count with us. That is displayed inside of our UI. We have a function that will increase our count using this setCount function, and then we have a button that will call that function. Right, it's pretty functional. I think most people that know React will understand this code. Now, on the left here, I have the default demo project from Flutter. Like, I can quickly go over it. We have a state in our stateful widget, a function to increment our counter, and a way to display our counter, and we call it from our button, our increment function. All right, and now how we do that in our hook, or Flutter hooks. First, we extend a hook widget, which is just basically a stateless widget, but now it's a hook widget, but for the rest it's all the same. Everything happens inside of our build function. As you can see, I initialize this useState inside of the build function itself. I have this increment counter, and I can just call them both from the same UI. So now I can implement all of my functionality in a functional way inside of my build function. All right, so we have this, and I want to go over a few basic hooks that we have available inside Flutter hooks. The first four, I think, for the React developers should be quite recognizable. We have a state, an effect, memoized, use reducer. Those are all hooks that are available inside of the Flutter hooks package. But we also have some other hooks, like a text editing controller or a listenable or other scroll controllers, and all these type of controllers. They're also exposed by the Flutter hooks package. For example, like if you want to have it memory safe, they are all automatically disposed. You don't have to do anything with it. That's a nice thing about it as well. But there are a lot of functions available to do this functional programming inside of our applications. Okay, that's the main thing tackled now. We can write this functional code with these hooks. We can manage our state. Now, how are we going to manage our global state? For that, we use Riverpod. I think most people over here know Riverpod. Who does not know Riverpod? Okay, a few person that does not know Riverpod. All right, okay, no worries. Riverpod is a global state management system, and it pairs very well with the Flutter hooks. If you go to the docs, there is also a toggle to show all the Flutter hook stuff inside of your docs. And also I have an example of that in React, where we have the context provider. On the left, we have our provider itself. This is a basic authentication. Obviously, this is not how we're going to use it in production, but this is just for demonstration purposes. We have an authentication provider with a state, whether a user is logged in or not, a login function, a register function, a logout function, and we can expose all that in a provider that we can wrap around our application. And inside, for example, a login page, we can access the provider, and we have some inputs there as well. We can call a function inside of our provider and get some results out of that. And that's all managed globally. Now we can do the same thing in Riverpod. we create our auth notifier. We also have some functions in there. We also have a state in there, and we can also call that notifier from our page. And inside of our page, then we can call the functions that are on our provider, and we can actually easily log inside of our applications. For example, in this case, we also have these text editing controllers that are coming from our hooks that are implemented here in our UI. And then inside of our function, we just trim everything off. We get the result of our login, and then we can route everything to the right place, all right? So this is how we can manage our global state. Then another thing we need to tackle is our calls. Here at Lemon, we almost always use GraphQL because we build our own custom backends, and we like GraphQL because we have all the domain generation and everything that comes with it. So we use GraphQL Flutter. GraphQL Flutter is a very nice package. Who has used GraphQL Flutter here? Okay, quite a lot of people. Okay, nice. Okay, so GraphQL Flutter, what can it do? So first we have our basic stuff where it can do all the network calls. We have a lot of automatic generation. So we just write out our basic scheme. We write out our query just in GraphQL. And it will generate all the boilerplate Dart code to, for example, parse our JSON to Dart objects. But it will also generate all the hooks that we need to use this inside of our code. And it also has a lot of managing over our cache. To give you a bit of context about that, we have, I have built a fairly basic diagram about how this works, where we have a network layer. Obviously, we just do our calls to our network. But then we have a big cache that is spread throughout our entire application as like a big provider around our application, where we have all our hooks that we can attach to that provider, and we can call all of them from our code. And all these hooks expose a data, a loading state, and an error state, and some other things. But those are the main things. And from these states, we can just show our data directly to our users in a functional way. But why do we have this cache here, and why is it so handy to have it spread over our entire application? Another example here, we have Receptive Sandra, which was an app we built. It's a recipe app. And you have the option to like recipes inside of that application. And obviously, if you like a recipe, you don't want to show a spinner, refetch if it's done, blah, blah, blah. We want to do that optimistically. So because we have that shared cache there, we can just update our cache every time a recipe is liked, and everywhere in our application, the data will automatically update, and we can have instant feedback that a recipe was liked. You don't need to show those spinners or those type of stuff. All right, a little bit of code to showcase this. We have a hook that is automatically generated by our package that will fetch a user in this case. We can parse out the parse data. We have this available as an object that is completely a Dart object. It's not JSON anymore. We have a loading state, and we have an exception. Based on those states, we can show other UI elements. If our result is completely loaded, we can just display it to our user. We also have this profile equals null check here. That is because we want to use that cache, and every time a page is loaded, and we also already have something in our cache, the is loading will go to true. So normally, if we don't put it over there, the circular progress indicator will be shown, but there is something available in our cache, so we already want to show that to our users to have a more a more responsible UI for our users. Okay, so we have tackled the main things now. We could actually quite easily start a development process up with new developers. The only actual thing that you need to learn now for Flutter is the UI, because that is still completely different, but all the logic behind it, we can do it with the same paradigms that we are used to as React developers. I'm not saying everybody should use this, because some people have different backgrounds, but for a company that mainly has React developers, this is a very interesting way of implementing it. And I want to go over some other things as well, because we were used to web development, and web development has a lot of interesting features. For example, one of the main things is responsive design. All the projects that we do here at Lemon we also always use the web version of Flutter as well. So even if the client doesn't require a web version, we still build our UI with the web version just because we want to promise our clients, okay, our app will scale, it will be responsive. If you need to spin up all the other simulators every time to check whether it's available on all different screen sizes, because these days we have iPhone SEs that are very small, but we also have the foldables, the iPads. So we have a large range of different devices where our applications need to run. We really want that responsiveness in there. So that's where web development really comes in handy. And even though it's not always required, we try to build almost all of our UI inside of the web version and make all the functionality work in that web version as well, just because we want that ease of development that we got out of the browser. And as well, the deployments that come with that, because everybody knows deploying an app is a pain in the ass. Deploying a web app is a lot less a pain in the ass, because it's just a URL, and you can go to the URL, and some pipeline can just update the files on the server. And that's why we use Amplify hosting. Who here uses Vercel or knows what Vercel is? Quite a lot of people. Do you like it? Because it has a lot of interesting features. For example, on your pull request, it will automatically create a URL. Whenever you're reviewing something, you just click a URL, and then you can see what was done inside of that PR. Amplify hosting is almost the equivalent from Vercel, but then for AWS. So you can just let your clients charge it, and you don't need to worry about pay per user. So it's a nicer paying scheme. It was for us real easy to just spin up the web version, say, hey, everyone, every time we push domain, this is the branch, this is the URL, just check it out, and this is always the latest version you have, which is really easy if you want to test something and not always deploy a new application. Then I want to go quickly over our project structure. We have the lib folder, I think everyone knows that. Then we have a folder that contains all of our common widgets, like, for example, buttons, inputs, whatever the fuck. Then we have a config file folder where we store all of our config functions, an environment variable folder where we store all of our environment variables. We actually use enved for that, so we have done env file somewhere else in our file system, and we just build it during the builder, as you know it, and it will just generate a scrambled version of these environment variables to have it more securely inside of your applications. Then we have the main thing. It's in our features folder. We split everything up in different features. For example, we have our login, and inside of our login we have our different, we have our authentication, and we have our different login features there. They all have their separate folder, and inside every folder is mainly a page. We have our main page widget in there as well, but we have also actions and queries and all our side widgets that come with that feature. All the query stuff, it's all the functions that we need to query. This can be all the network calls, but also, for example, if you need the state of the camera or the location of whatever. Then we have the actions. It really fits to our CQRS approach, because when we build our applications in our backend, we use CQRS to manage the state. So we have the mutations and the queries, and we can easily see that in our front end as well. We have the actions, which is someone clicks a button or something, everything needs to happen. We store all this function for that in the designated folders. Then we have our providers, where we store all our global state for our river pod. The infrastructure folder, this is mainly there for testing, where we can store like config files or functions to expose the camera or the location and those kind of stuff. The routes, we use autorouter for that. The themes speak for itself. Translations, we use easy localizations just because we could just, during runtime, update all the translations if you want. We don't need to do a new deploy for that. And then a utils folder as well. All right, then we come to testing. For example, we have the Olympus Mobility app. That was quite a complex application, so we need to do a lot of testing inside of that application. And there we use BDD. There was already a lightning talk about BDD, so I'm not going to go into depth about that. But BDD, shortly, what is it? We can write out a BDD file like this, where we just describe in human language whatever needs to happen or what needs to be tested inside of our applications. Business should also be able to read these files, and everybody should be able to understand what is going on here. All these sentences you see over here, they all get translated to tests, Dart tests. And you also have like some variables in here that can easily be changed. And for example, we have a way to say, I press this button. All our buttons inside of our applications have their unique keys. And if we go to another page, I mean, you need to write tests for that page, we only need to write out this file, and most functionality will already be implemented, so we can easily implement new tests. So this is also something we use in React, and it was also nice to have this available in Flutter. All right, then the last thing, we need to go live. We have our deployments, where we use CodeMagic. I think almost everybody knows here CodeMagic. Who doesn't know CodeMagic? No? Okay, very nice tool to have for your pipelines to deploy all your applications. Our main, or like our test builds, they all go to a Firebase app distribute, because it's just easy. We have all of our iPhones that we have in turn here at Lemon. They are all registered at Apple, so we can just distribute it easily. But for our clients, it's not always easy to have that Firebase, because they're always like, oh, I don't understand it, how I should register my device. So it's always a pain in the ass, so that's why we use TestFlight. We also have Shorebird. If you don't use Shorebird, also just enable it in your applications. It's very nice to be able to push something to an app that is already in production without going to the entire app process. So it's easy to push bugs. Then we have our different flavors, because we want to have different apps installed during the development. So we can just have a flavor for staging, for dev, and for production, and we can just all install them at the same time. I already talked about Amplify hosting. Here you can see how it will look inside of your PRs. You just click the link. And then as last thing, we have Datadog, which is our monitoring tool, which just gives us a nice dashboard where we can view all the things that are happening inside of our applications. All right, that was me going over how we at Lemon do our Flutter setup and how we came from a React thing. Don't take this as the golden approach, but definitely an interesting way of doing it if you're coming from a React background. All right, are there any questions left?